it was just in my head, but I didn't know how to put it together or map it out.
Mm.
And the day I got arrested for the bank robbery, and I'm laying there in handcuffs, looking out into the ocean, and I'm like, man, this is the last time I'm gonna see the streets for a while. I'm like, why didn't I just stay in bed? And I'm thinking like, God damn, what gave me? Why did I get up and go? I'm
Oh
like,
man.
damn, just an hour difference, and I wouldn't be here. And so that right there snapped me. That's like, man, this is over with. I got to figure some shit out. And I started
Mm.
from that day forward searching for something to give me purpose and figure out what direction I really want to go in. If I wanted to have nice things, if I wanted to live a good life, what did I need to change about myself?
Mm.
So when I got to prison, I started I found the guy who
Hey all, Jesse McCarthy here with Montessori Education. So today's going to be an abnormal day. Who you just heard or saw if you're on YouTube is Big Herc or Marcus Timmons. He robbed the bank. It's kind of crazy. I'm going to get to some of why I am having him on, which is abnormal for a show that's normally for parents and teachers. But first, I want to get to his bio, and he wrote up some cool stuff. So I'll just try to read some of it and go back and forth. But to start at the beginning, so Big Herc Marcus was born to a mom who was only 14 years old. So that's how he started life, and he never really knew his father. So interesting beginnings. Despite this, Herc still managed to do pretty well in school. He went to traditional school, got straight A's. He also kept himself pretty busy, BMXing, skateboarding, he played basketball. So nothing really out of the ordinary. But at age 15, things changed. So as Herc tells it, watching my mom struggle to take care of three kids following a divorce was too much, and I felt I had to earn my keep. So that's when he started hustling on the block, things like selling drugs. And this was to put food on the table and buy clothes for school. He also started serious weight training. So if you saw him, this guy is ripped. And this was back then he started. And this was to get his fight game up for the local knuckleheads, as he calls them. And he dreamed of one day making it big out of the hood. So back then, Herc he was basically living a double life. And he's trying to keep the streets on the streets and be a loving son at home. But that fast money soon led him to juvenile lockup, and he was then in the system. Now, it would take over 10 years and multiple incarcerations for Herc to realize that he had, as he puts it, the power to create his own reality and break the cycle of negativity. But he had to hit rock bottom first when he was sentenced to 120 months in federal custody, and that's for that bank robbery. Now, during this time, and it's crazy to think about, but he served 9 years in full. Herc didn't receive any visits from family or friends, and it all made him put his life into perspective. It was a true test, as he puts it, of his ability to stay mentally sound and not become institutionalized. He finally got out, and when released, he had only $300 in his pocket and no place to live. But you get out of jail, you're alive, and Herc was determined to make something of himself. As he puts it, my thoughts became my reality and success followed. Herc has done a lot since getting out of prison. So he's acted, he's created a workout video. Big Herc. He's written several books. In this case, go check their titles out. You'll find some very interesting stuff there. He does public speaking, and probably most importantly, he's a mentor. And this is for both young and struggling adults. And then he's also become a huge influencer on YouTube. That's where I found him originally, with his series Fresh Out and Big Herc 916. And man, he's got hundreds of millions of views over the years since he started back in 2013. So Herc definitely has an ability to overcome challenges, adversity. That goes without saying, and it's actually, again, one of the reasons I wanted to have him on the show. Now we're focused on children here, but it's always about us getting better too. So when I first heard Herc speaking, the guy just talks really straight. So whether he's talking to inmates, talking to normal people on the street, or just giving his take, he doesn't put on a front. And I think a lot of times in our culture, it's difficult for us to just talk straight to one another because we're worried, oh, am I going to say the wrong thing in this case, or I'm going to offend this person? And instead of just having conversations, and seeing how people think and then pushing back. And I'll tell you, Herc, we did over Zoom, and I felt like, ooh, should I push back on this? And I was like, you know what? I got to. And I would just push back, and he took it. He took it pretty solidly. And then he gave his reasons for X or Y, or, so I'm saying that because if you're a regular listener of mine, just be ready. He's going to say some things that will probably upset you. He might say some things that you disagree with. And, and just, you got to be thinking, and I got to be thinking when I hear him, do I agree with this or do I disagree? And why do I agree? Why do I disagree? And put it forward, but I'm just noting that because, too many people just get too enraged over things instead of just saying, hey, what is this guy saying? Do I agree with it? What's my take? So that's just a forewarning for regular listeners and anybody else out there. Also, there's some bad language. So if your kids are around, be forewarned. There's going to be some language in this one. I think that's really it. Herc grew up, I think, Sacramento, California, so more north. I'm from Southern California, so we had a connection there that we kind of get to. And the first answer, the first conversation you're going to hear from Herc is based on, we were talking before we recorded a little bit, and we were talking about Herc left California actually because he seemed to be fed up with the crazy homelessness that was going on and also crime, funny enough. But this is like broad daylight stuff. So Herc just had enough, and he said, I'm moving out of state. So the context here is I asked him, so the first question that came up was, what do you think about all of this? And in particular, it seems like we're pumping a lot of money into this problem, but it doesn't seem to be getting better. So why do you think it's the case that we can put a lot of money into a problem, but that money doesn't necessarily solve the problem? So that's the context. And here we go. Hope you enjoy.
Yeah. Well, I was just when I was in Nevada, I spoke out of college, and they got all these minority programs for funding, government funding, guys getting out of prison, how to start, starting your own business. And for the most part, even when I was at the halfway house, there's a certain mentality, and it's like people like say, like, if you want to really achieve success, you're talking about, like you said, not being a victim. You have to want to have some type of drive, or you have a mapped out plan. But like, for instance, like, people started in the halfway house because they wanted to still get high but not get caught. They started smoking spice, which is virtually potpourri. So guys were smoking potpourri that used to get and put in, my mom used to put in to make the house smell good. They're getting high off of this shit, which is, these drugs now are frying people's brains to the point of no return. So you're not coming back from like a little high, and it's crazy. And then I've been to Skid Row. I went down there with my partner, my wife passed out clothing, hung out, and I've seen what's going on down there. And literally, people don't even want to leave there. I mean, they're cool because they don't want no rules. They don't want to be told what to do. I met a guy, this dude could tell you everything about the stock market. I mean, he talked about like these stocks that were going to crash. He knew about the basically the market trends. His sister was a lawyer. His brother worked for NASA. He had a trust. He just loved being on the street, and he said he liked to smoke crack. He's like, I just like to smoke crack. He could go to a house right now. His family has money, but he said, man, I just like to be out here. I like the element. And then he said, hey, hold on a second. Went over with some other ladies, fired up some crack right in front of us. Yeah. And like, dude, that was him. I mean, so how do you help those people?
Yeah. And I'm wondering with you, because man, I wish I should have got the dude's name that you spoke with, but you both, there's something about like taking control of your life, what you're saying, this is my life. I want to make the most of it. And I want to enjoy it. I want to enjoy it. Do you see with the people that you're talking about, do they have a sense that I like who I am? Because that's something I've noticed about you and this other dude that you were interviewing at one point. It just seems like, hey, I like who I am. And I actually heard Mike Tyson say that about a year back. Somebody was like on him about something. He's like, you know what? I've grown up. Like before, I didn't like who I was. I like who I am now. That type of thing.
Well, I think that goes into finding a sense of self. Even in prison, like, you could be very angry at the government, the police, and all this stuff, but you were putting yourself into a negative environment. Like I was, when I reflected and started thinking about all the choices I made that led to going to prison, I couldn't blame the white man. I couldn't blame the system. I couldn't blame all these things, because I thought about it. I'm like, okay, I've lived in Huntington Beach. I've lived in the hood, but my family, nobody else has been locked up. I had good grades in school. I had these options, but I wasn't tapping into resources. I didn't know how. I was pretty much just most people up until like their, especially males around their mid to late 20s are wanderers. We're kind of bouncing around unless you find a mentor group or a peer group that has direction, or you have like a father figure or uncle who like kind of gives you, some kind of rules to life and sets out a plan. You don't really know. You kind of just, that's why people go into the military. It's like, I don't know what I want to do. I'm going to go into the military. And
Hmm.
you kind of juggle around what you want to do. Or if you have, maybe a little better resource, you go to junior college, you try to figure it out. But a lot of people have no sense of self, have no direction. And the easiest way to cope with life, if you have no perspective, is to kind of float through and get high. And sometimes the getting high part takes over, and it becomes it becomes a routine, and then you get lost in the abyss, and then it's hard to pull yourself out. The only
Hmm.
difference is some people have money to where they can send their kids to rehab, and other people, once they fall into that, literally, if they don't have a relative that's going to pull them in, they're homeless. I mean, I have
Yeah.
two relatives now that are that would be that one of them would be homeless if it wasn't for my mom, and another one had an opportunity and just basically the drugs squandered it. So, and I have another relative that's had six kids on the streets homeless and don't have custody of none of them. Luckily relatives have taken them all in.
Mhm.
So I mean, this person, I mean, and pretty girl, but continually to get pregnant on the street, it makes you wonder, like, wow. And we've, families try to help her, but it's like they want to go back to the streets, and it's crazy.
So do you see something like that's you like you look at one person who says, I'm gonna take I'm gonna take this other person's help. I know I've been in a bad situation, my mind's all jacked up, but I'm gonna take this person's help. Versus somebody's like, listen, I like smoking, I like being on the streets. Is there something that you've noticed? Because you've interviewed a lot of people that like, is there some little thing, or what is it you think from your experience so far?
Um, it's like if something's got to snap inside of you, because I mean, in one instance, I interviewed somebody and they were in prison and they were dealing with so much time. They started doing heroin in prison, smoking heroin to kind of cope with the time. And you don't want to deal with the reality of such a dark place, and you're so stressed out. It's an escape, from having to think about doing 20 something years. Nobody wants to. I mean, it's a lot of weight. I mean, even when I first got to prison, I never contemplated drugs. I never contemplated suicide, but I was like, man, how do I get past all this time? So you have to find purpose in life. And until you find purpose, it's hard to really, fathom how to live in the reality. And even, I have, like I said, that's had family members that have spent, upwards almost six figures on rehabilitation, sending them to like clinics, treatment centers. And even this person who I knew from high school is still kind of like, still, I can see he's still dabbling in the drugs and all the resources in the world, but he hasn't really dealt with himself, and he hasn't thought about all the other people he's affecting by his actions. So a lot of people are selfish in their actions, and they don't think about everybody else, their grandparents, their sister, their little brother that looks up to them, the auntie, all these people who are trying to put energy into helping them. It's just a very selfish act, and you got to kind of step back from that and think about the people you're affecting that you don't directly think you're affecting, but it trickles down. And then maybe
Mhm.
that will be like, you know what, as far as just for these people, I need to do it for myself so that I can be a better a mentor, or a better representation of what I want them to become. And that's kind of like where a lot of people, until they see that, if they don't do it for themselves, they have to see that. You have to think about something else outside of yourself, so you don't let an addiction totally take you over and control your life.
Yeah. So it seems like some people you'll see it's kind of like, hey, I got to do this. I got a child. I didn't realize I got to do this for my child, or I got to do this for my family. And if you don't have something like that, you can get sucked in even further. And then I'm wondering if, because again, I'm saying coming back to you and what drew me to you beyond, you just how straight you talk. And I love that. I want to talk about that in particular in a moment, but just that there's like a relish for life. It's like a zest for living. And I don't know if it's partly that, you were locked up and it's like you don't have this freedom anymore, and that contrast. But one thing that I wanted to ask you is, I know in high school, I used to drink. I don't talk a lot about this on the show because it's about children, but in high school on the weekends I go out and party. I played football and then I'd party like a lot of kids. And man, friends of mine and I would drink and drive. And now I think about that, like, that's crazy. You could have killed other people, you could have killed yourself. But they had people come to the school and show all these, people dying from getting in a car act. They had a whole setup where the fake car got compiled. And it was like, oh, that's scary. And then the next day you'd go out and drink. So it wasn't for me, it wasn't until I was like, now I was never like an alcoholic or something like crazy, but there was a moment where I said, I don't want to do this because I enjoy life. I'm risking my life. So is there a moment for you where you reflected and said, I don't want this life because then I can't fulfill my own dreams for my life, like what I want to be, what I want myself to look like? Like, was there a moment like that for you or?
Well, I think the key moment, because even before I got locked up, it wasn't like I robbed the bank because I was broke. I mean, I had money and I was living life, but I didn't really have a direction. I wanted to do things, but I didn't have any solid plan. It was just in my head, but I didn't know how to put it together or map it out.
Mm.
And the day I got arrested for the bank robbery, and I'm laying there in handcuffs, looking out into the ocean, and I'm like, man, this is the last time I'm gonna see the streets for a while. I'm like, why didn't I just stay in bed? And I'm thinking like, God damn, what gave me? Why did I get up and go? I'm
Oh
like,
man.
damn, just an hour difference, and I wouldn't be here. And so that right there snapped me. That's like, man, this is over with. I got to figure some shit out. And I started
Mm.
from that day forward searching for something to give me purpose and figure out what direction I really want to go in. And if I wanted to have nice things, if I wanted to live a good life, what did I need to change about myself?
Mm.
So when I got to prison, I started, I found a guy who taught me about the law, one mentor, and another guy who taught me about spirituality. And
Mm.
so I would kind of bounce between these mentors. And the one gentleman, one was white about the law, and the other one was black about the spirituality. And he taught me about having purpose and living for like an higher cause. And I just really started focusing on that. And then I also did almost like a regression type of exercise where I broke myself down to nothing and
Mm.
thought about all the things I had gave value to that people had instilled in me. And I decided whether or not I needed to keep those
Mm.
values or did I need to replace them with something that I came up originally. So by doing that, I created a new me with better values and things I like, whether it's something that was taught by my mom or my grandfather or something I had witnessed or something a homie had showed me. I got rid of those things that weren't relevant and I replaced them with things I felt would make me a better person. And then
Mm.
I started really trying to visualize what I wanted in life. I would read Wall Street Journal, I'd read Vanity Fair, Fortune magazine, start reading autobiographies. I would look at like the DuPont Register, the Architectural Digest, and think about all these things and like how I would go about creating this new reality from which was so different from my old reality, which was just whatever. And by doing that, I kind of started like basically I call it hustling in the fourth dimension to create these things in the third dimension and make them a reality. And I got into writing, I got into helping people with the law, I got into these other things that gave myself self-confidence and value. And by doing that, I had like almost like the sense of urgency to accomplish my goals now because I knew what my potential. Well, I didn't know what my potential was, but I knew I had potential. But it's what I did with that. It's like you seeing the guy, or at school, and this guy's really good in basketball. He does all this stuff, but you see him messing up. He's cutting class. He's like you say, getting partying, getting high. And you're like, dude, if you got all these scouts looking at you, but you're throwing away your future. Or somebody you've seen that was very talented as an artist, and but they're caught up and they're not focusing on their art, or if they're a good auto mechanic, but they're half-assed. So I try to figure out like if I didn't do something half-assed and I really focused on it, how could I turn that into an actual lifestyle? And that's what shifted me. So totally separated myself from people talking about like really negative things. I didn't go around prison like rehashing my criminal activity. I didn't engage in that type of war story talk. And I just really tried to forcibly reprogram myself, which was
Wow.
hard because you're in such a negative environment and everybody wants to rehash and live in the past. You have
Mm,
what they call in their man-childs. You have guys in their 40s still talking about 18, 19 because they got locked up when they were 22. So
mm,
they have no experience of life. So everybody's living decades before. Nobody's living in the moment because nobody's actually experienced life in the moment. Most of the
yeah.
guys have been down for, anywhere from, 5 to 15 years. So they don't even know what's going on in the real world. So their perception of the world is the past, not the present.
Man, so many points that come out with that. So it's almost like, I mean, you did like psychotherapy for yourself. Like you went back and said, like, I like this about who I was, and I don't like this, and I'm replacing what
Yes.
I don't. And so this is kind of the connection. I mean, I know some people in my audience can be like, why are you having this guy on this? And I'm going to say, because there was something about you where I thought he must have looked back in particularly in childhood and saying, looking back and saying, just like you said, what is me and what is not me, and I need to change that person. I'm wondering, do you think, based on that, was some of it that stuff that you got as a child that somebody else told you is right, or that you picked up and thought was right, and you had to say, no, I don't know how you call yourself now, Big Herc. I mean, I call you Big Herc, but if you're talking to yourself, you're like, Big Herc, this is not you. This is something you picked up as a kid. You might have believed it when you were 5 or 7, but this is not right. I mean, did you go through that type of process? Like what?
Yeah, yeah, literally, I thought about like moments like time I spent with my grandmother. I spent a lot of time with my grandmother because my mom had me real young. So my mom had me at 14. So I remember her going
Wow.
through high school. So my grandmother, I spent a lot of time with her and her friends, and she gave me a lot of values, core values, which, kind of gave me the hospitality side. Hey, excuse me, thank you, you're welcome, very, these courtesy things. And she always taught me good value. You don't steal, you don't do this, you don't talk back, you don't do, a lot of these don't do's and respect things. And so I didn't come from a background where, it was just a lot of like negativity. And then she liked to go in church on Sundays, even though I didn't really like to go, but, make me go to Sunday school. So I started looking at these little things. And then I thought about all the other good values I had been exposed to, people who had families that were normal, and a lot of the things, and I started comparing them to some of the things I was witnessing in the moment and what these people considered their normal life and what I considered. And I started just really saying, you know what, I got to make a distinction, because I can recall in juvenile hall, my mom coming to see me when I got caught up back in the day for selling drugs, and she was very disappointed. I was a straight A student. I wasn't like a dumb kid. I've never even drank the whole 40 ounce. I've never smoked a joint. I used to get straight A's. My average grade point average was like probably four. I had 4.0. I maybe got a couple C's in my,
Wow.
maybe one C in my whole high school life, and maybe three B's. Other than that, I got all A's. So when I went to juvenile hall and I'm looking at these guys and hardcore gang members back in the 80s, I mean, their moms coming in there, family members banging, and I'm looking at it, but I wasn't able to put it all together because learning, taking advice from my mom, who's a woman, I looked at her as still being weak, even though she was strong. So had I maybe had an older male that could have kind of like put a foot down and gave me more of a authoritative perspective, I would have caught on earlier. So I didn't catch on because I had stepdads, but by the time my mom got married the second time when I was 16, we were just friends. That guy couldn't really tell me nothing. So I didn't really get a real male mentor until I got to the pen when I was 23, 24. And then he started putting things in perspective as an older black male. He was articulate. He wore his pants up high. He always, and we had these conversations, and he came from South Central, but he wasn't a ghetto dude. He was very intelligent, had a Testarossa on the street, Porsche 911, all these nice things. And as a black dude, I'm like, man, I've never seen a black guy in a Testarossa or Porsche. I've never seen a Porsche in my hood, or Mercedes 560 SEC. So he used to talk and tell me these things, and he was in jail for doing basically like heist. He would take these container trucks and jack them and then sell the goods inside. So his hustle
Mm,
was unlike any other black guy I've seen. He wasn't a dope dealer and he wasn't a bank robber. So we would
mm,
talk, but past the whatever criminal element, he had a lot of intellectual and spiritual advice, and I respected him and I learned a lot from him. I was only underneath him for mentoring for about 18 months, but we maintained communication, and I took his whatever he instilled inside of me. I took that to every other place I went to,
mm.
and then I tried to share that with other guys who are locked up, and we create these study groups. And so we'd
Wow.
bounce ideas and share these different childhood moments or different things about our characteristics so that we could help each other. And I just tried to keep that going and not allow myself to fall back into these other cycles. And I started
Mm,
realizing a lot of these guys, not to sound like I was better than them, but there were a lot of mental midgets, guys who had a very low capacity to think beyond their surroundings. You know, a lot of jealousy. I had a lot of guys that didn't like me because of the way I talked and like how I carried myself, which I didn't socialize enough to where these guys felt I was clicked up with them. So
mm.
I didn't go to these little get-togethers, and I always had a book bag full of books, and I was always talking to other nationalities, and a lot of guys didn't like that. So you literally, if you want to fit in to a degree, you would have to dumb yourself down in prison. And I wasn't willing to do that anymore. I had felt I did enough of that in life to where either you take me how I am or you don't have to mess with me, but just don't put your hands on me, you know? So that was kind of like my whole mentality moving forward. And I think it was a blessing also having lived on a military base, being around a bunch of different uh, nationalities, Filipino, white, Hispanic, Hawaiian. And I could talk to anybody. And I had did a lot of things growing up. I mean, I did everything from skateboarding to BMX. I sold natural gas partnerships.
Wow.
I had been on a private jet before. I'd been exposed to all these, been in Hollywood a little bit. So I've seen these little things so I could talk about a lot of stuff. And then that made me also realize that I had a lot more going than I realized. So I drew a lot of my experiences from those past experiences, which kind of molded me going forward. And I just really said, I'm just going to really focus on the future and becoming this new Big Herc.
Hmm. And so, I mean, you mentioned this guy was helping you in prison. It almost sounds like a true model. Like if you're saying basically, if you were younger and you would have had somebody, maybe a male figure that you could look up to and say, oh, that's what a successful human being looks like, and I can be like that. That might have helped you even earlier in life, possibly.
Oh, for sure. If I would, I mean, my grandfather was, he's a hard worker and he was successful. He had like 4 or 5 houses, had money retirement, 4 or 5 cars at all times. I mean, but he was a blue collar. And I always used to ask him, like, why didn't you ever, because one of my favorite movies was Wall Street, Gordon Gekko. I watched that movie. I watched it like probably 8 times, and then
Mm,
I read, Barbarians at the Gate, and I read
mm,
all these different things about hedge fund. So I'm like, and I watched Lifestyle of the Rich and Famous. I used to say, Grandpa, why didn't you ever try to, be like these people and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, well, I'm not that smart. And I look at
oh
him like, dude,
man.
so I'm thinking to myself, but he's like, you're good at the books. So I'm like, but I didn't have, all I had was blue collar. I didn't have anybody teach me about an LLC. I didn't have
Mm,
anybody to teach me about really stock investments or how to maybe grow a business. And I actually, before I did any criminal activity, I had these ideas. I wrote Nike. I sent them shoe designs. I wrote Adidas.
it's
I
awesome.
wrote in television. I wrote Coleco. I tried to design video games before I knew what coding was. So I tried a lot of different things
Mm,
living in the hood where if I looked out my window, I would see guys literally selling drugs or, just street dudes. And so I try to envision getting out of there and take going away somewhere else, but I didn't know how to do it. So I tried these different things. And when all else failed, I'm like, well, maybe I should just get involved in selling drugs and maybe I can use that. And once you kind of get into that mentality of a street and you program yourself to be a street guy and you take on that persona, it's like I always say it's like a generator spinning, like with these blades, and it generates so much speed that if you throw anything into it, it is shredded. So for me to have this much speed going this way, to the point where I committed a bank robbery, broad daylight with guns and ski masks. I had to do a lot to stop that generator and reverse it and
Yeah.
get to spin the same other direction. And that took years of momentum because it took years for me to work up to doing a bank robbery. It wasn't like, that's my first crime, so
Yeah.
that's 10 years in the making. It's the same thing with these young people. Somebody who becomes a killer or a hitter or whatever the case may be, it took them years. They maybe start off at 14 and work their way up. And then at, 22, 20, it's like shooting somebody was just like nothing. And then they get
Yeah.
locked up and they realize, oh man, my life is done. And I could have done all these other things. So I kind of caught that by doing these spiritual exercises and meditations. And I was really just focused on reversing that momentum and creating enough momentum to where everything I attracted was of a positive rather than a darker nature.
Mm. Yeah, and it's interesting reaching out to you because again, it's like, well, why reach out to you? This is an education and parenting program, so why reach out to you, Big Herc? And even you saying that reversal, because I'll get a lot of parents that come to me and they'll be like, I just find myself yelling at my child, like they'll flip out. They lose their cool, just like I'm sure in prison you saw people flipping out and angry at somebody else, and that reversal of saying, hey, this is not who I want to be. It's not an overnight thing, right? Like you didn't,
No.
like you said, you didn't just become a bank robber. If you were, oh, I'm happy working at my job and tomorrow I will rob a bank. Like that's not how it works. So with that in mind, just thinking about the development up of children, because you're kind of talking about yourself going from bank robber to, successful person who said, I'm going to be different. How do you see some of the people that you met in prison? What have you seen any similarities of was there certain things that happened to them in childhood or at younger ages that were similar? Or, I mean, it's all over the place in terms of what brought about this kind of, whether it's violence or robbery or what happened in prison?
I think a lot of it has to do with your peer group because, you know, before, like I said, when I wrote Nike and, Coleco and these different places, when I was a kid trying to be an entrepreneur and I came up with a clothing line and tried to do these different hustles. Before that, I skateboarded, but skateboarding wasn't really big. And so, you had to look at Thrasher or Transworld, and I used to try to emulate the tricks. And, I wanted to do all these things, but it wasn't like I seen another black guy doing it. It wasn't no black guy skateboard. I just wanted to skateboard because I felt it was fun, it was different, and I was decent at it. And so, moving forward and going to prison, you have guys that I've talked to that, are maybe around gang members that sold dope and, or somebody around them was, a big influence in the neighborhood. But it wasn't like they all came from bad families because I got one of the guys who reached out to me who seen my channel. He was my cellmate. And I remember he had done a bank robbery, did like maybe 8 to 10 years in YA, he got out, got caught up for some more bank robberies, had another fresh 12 years in the feds. So he had done almost, 20 some years of his life in prison, but now he's out. He runs one of those businesses that he gets contracts from the city to put the lines on the street and all this stuff. The guy's making six figures, $300,000-$400,000 a year. Almost, he's going to be a millionaire here soon. But he said when he got out, he moved from LA to, North Carolina, got the hell out of there and changed his environment. So a lot of these guys have potential. It's just what you're exposed to. And so knowing what I know now is so important that you pay attention to your kids' friends and environment because majority of the children spend majority of their life outside the household. They eat dinner at home, they sleep at home, and have weekends to a degree at home, but you're out with your friends, you're hearing these stuff, you're exposed to these things. And even then, it doesn't mean just because you're in this wealthy environment that you're not going to get caught up because those kids might be experimenting with their parents' pills. They could be doing other things, but I noticed like even when I lived in Huntington, the extent of what kids did was going to a kegger party, and maybe toilet paper in somebody's front yard. It wasn't like in Sacramento where, we might get a pistol, go up to a venue, go fight somebody, looking at getting into something. I mean, maybe, contemplating, jacking somebody. It was a different mentality of just as far as children's demographics based on exposure. And even to this day, like certain friends I have, then I tell them about some of the stuff I experienced going to Pebble Beach, traveling over here. They don't really care. It doesn't interest them because their mentality is different. So some people are just different and they get caught up. Some people, it's like, spiritually, I don't know how you define it, but a lot of times your friends or your family is by default. You can't choose them. So you can't force them to be a certain way. And you just hope that with giving them the best exposure and opportunity, they can capitalize and be successful in life. But not, it's like having a family full of 4 kids. Not every kid is going to want to do the same thing.
Yeah.
One kid, he can have everything, but he can go on and maybe get hooked on heroin. One kid might become alcoholic. And it's like, why do they do that? Who knows? I don't know what, if it's a chemical thing or
Mm-hmm.
what it is, but I mean, some kids in certain households have a more drive than the others, so they can go on to achieve greatness. And it just, I don't know what that key factor is, but
Yes.
I know one to give the kid the best opportunity is exposure, but being able to see both sides. Like I can go to the squarest place and go and be the only black guy, quote unquote, and have a conversation, whether it be about politics, finance, travel, business, or I can go to the hood and talk about street shit. So I can go either way. A lot of people can't do that. A lot of these people, they'll be scared to death. They wouldn't know how to navigate in that
Yeah.
environment, and vice versa. I could take a guy from the hood, go take him to Malibu, and he'll be like, "Oh man, I don't belong here." So it's being able to be a chameleonaire in both places, but a lot of people don't really have that drive. They get in a comfort zone and they don't want to change. They say they want change, but they don't want to put the time and energy to actually change. It's just a lot of talk. So it's hard to put a pinpoint on why. But for myself, I always knew I was different. I just never, like I said, I didn't have that male really interaction to bring it out of me. My grandfather never really sat down and had a lot of talks with me, and he didn't. A lot of the stuff I learned on my own, how to golf or going to a jazz festival. I did all that stuff on my own.
Yeah.
So it's like I had to learn by falling down and getting up and dusting off the dirt and falling down and bumping my head. I had to learn the hard way.
Have you read Frederick Douglass's biography?
I believe I think I have. I think I read his book in prison. I mean, I read so many books, but I'm quite sure. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure I remember that name.
Man, because Frederick Douglass is in the 1800s with slavery. He was, I mean, he reminds me to some extent of what your experience, because I mean, he was kept down. I mean, he's literally a slave, and he looked around. He's like, this sucks. This is a horrible experience. But some of these guys are just giving up, and some of these other guys, I feel bad, but what am I going to do with my life? And he just, I mean, this guy literally took himself out of slavery. Like he beat the hell out of his owner and left. Like it was so there's elements that remind me of you. But one thing that strikes me, and I'm curious, you're talking a lot about race. You say I'm a black dude and you talk about this. So in my area right now in early education, this is huge. Race is like, I mean,
Oh,
it's like everything else went out the door, math, science. It's like, let's just change race. Let's talk about race. And what's been interesting in listening to you is, you have all these different experiences. I grew up in Orange County, California, which I know, like the area in California, at least. But it was affluent, but we had base kids that got bussed in. So a lot of my friends were like, didn't quote fit in Orange County, but I interacted with all these different types of people. So a lot of my friends in junior high and then high school were black. So I had just this combination. So when all this race stuff came up, and people would talk about how black people think, or how, black people are fed. I'd say, man, I knew a lot of black people and they had different opinions about a lot of stuff. It's not like there's one black opinion. So I really wanted to get your perspective on what's happening now with young kids. Is they're doing a lot of what they call anti-racism or anti-bias training. And they're saying you should start this with, I'm talking like 3, 4, 5-year-olds. So I'm just curious your take on, what do you think about this, given your exposure to the world and your, where you've been?
dude. The more they talk about this, the more they're purposely creating that identifying separation. I didn't even know I was black until I moved to Texas and I got jumped by some white kids that called me the N-word. And I'm like, what is that? And I told my mom, and she's like, oh, blah, blah, blah. That's a negative term. Don't use that word. And I kind of realized, okay, there's some racism in Texas. But, at the same token, one of my best friends in Texas was a little white kid. And we used to hang out, push our little, NASCARs around the sidewalk, and I would kick it at their house. And so I still didn't grasp the concept of racism, even going to school in San Francisco. I mean, Filipino, Laotian, black, everybody capped on everybody. They would talk shit about me. Oh, you're, bow-legged, you're dark skinned, and we laugh. And then I talk stuff. And even my friend in school, he was white, and I kind of looked out for him, but he bust in with me, and he was like my little brother, and we would cap and make all these jokes, but it was no big thing. And by them trying to emphasize the divide and separation, and you're black, so this and that. Look, man, I never had this discussion with my grandparents or my mom growing up that being black was a disability. That there's a pity party, that you need to feel sorry, that because of white people, you don't have as much as they have. Nobody ever explained that to me, so I never grasped that concept that there was any potential limitation on what I could accomplish. My grandfather never said anything about this, and he grew up in the South. He told me one time, he said, man, I picked cotton for a day, and I was like, dude, this ain't for me. He had a big bag of cotton, and he got like $10 or $12. He's like, dude, I'm not doing this. So he lived in the racist South, and he never talked about it, but he told stories about how in the military, driving across country, and how they would be all piled up in the Cadillac and get gas, and he'd leave the car running because, dude, you see the signs like, hey, if you're black, don't stop, blah blah blah. And even having seen that in the South in the 60s, and he never said anything derogatory about white or Caucasian people. He said he would go to military, but show up, and because he talked well on the phone, he'd get there and be like, Mr. Timmons, and he'd be like, yes. He's like, oh, I'm sorry to inform you, but your housing it's been taken. You don't have. And he'd be like, what? And then the guy would come out above him, come here, Tim, let me talk to you. He's like, oh no, we got you covered, this and that. But so he experienced it in different levels, even in the military, but it never came across in his mind that he couldn't get something because he was black. And he always told me, and he's telling my friends, he said, man, you better leave those jokers alone. He called them jokers. When he see me around my friends who were knucklehead, kind of thugged out looking, pull your pants up. He said, man, you gonna learn, man, but you better stop messing around. But he didn't know how to break it down into a more, I guess, simplistic or intimate, to where he made it make sense that it's not about so much your race. It's about how you present yourself to the world, how you carry yourself, how you talk, how you interact with somebody. So I was always conscious of my talk, my conversation, making sure that I tried to be well read as far as having knowledge about different things. I was always one of those kids out the box, but yeah, man, I mean, I experienced it in prison, and most of the time, most of the people who hated against me were blacks. You're trying to be white. You're trying to be Mexican. Big Herc, what are you in here for? Credit card fraud? Oh, man, blah, blah, blah. They thought I was soft because I was a big guy. Well, not because I was big. If I was smaller, I would have got probably jumped. But because I talked well, and I always carried a bag full of books. I used to have a laundry bag, literally like a weight in my back, like stack full of books. And I'd walk around with these books, and they were like, man, why are you always studying, man? Are you getting out? Are you getting out? And I'm like, no, I'm passing through, but I'm trying to see, maybe I can learn something on the way to get out early. So this whole race thing is, to me, a ploy, because they can't use religion. They're trying to use race to divide everybody. If this was Iran, it'd be the Sunnis against the Shiites. They'd be dividing us among religion. But here, race is the easiest way. And if they can divide everybody, there's no communication like me and you, and everybody basically has a standoff, and there's no intelligent forum for people to have conversation. Dude, when people talk, I hear black people sometimes say, oh man, the police. Dude, every time I've had a really interaction with the police, I went to jail for doing something I wasn't supposed to be doing. So I was doing some shit. And then when I have gotten pulled over other times, I talk, And, you know, I'm not living down south, but, you know, I've been in places in LA that's grimy, and police is like, hey, man, what do you, and I conduct myself in a manner. And, you know, even in other situations, and I've been in a situation where police have, you know, made some threats too. But at the end of the day, I'm not blaming the police. I'm not blaming the white person. I'm just saying, you know, as a part of life, we understand that certain things happen in this country, but to sit there and trying to embed in a child these, you know, this mindset, you're actually creating a wall or potential limitations in what they think they can achieve, and also how they're going to interact with people going forward. One of my big things is, like I said, I grew up around diversity, and it used to trip people out because most black guys in the penitentiary from back east, Baltimore, New York, um, DC, they never had a white friend or Mexican friend. You know what I mean? Mexican girlfriend. Dude used to ask me, Big Herc, you dated a white girl? Yeah. You dated a Mexican girl? Yeah. You dated a Filipino girl? Yeah. God, man, I've never seen a Filipino. I mean, these dudes, bro. It's America.
Yeah, they
These
haven't
guys
lived.
have never, they
Yeah.
haven't lived. You know, I
Yeah.
would talk to a white guy in the yard. Somebody say, hey, man, what are you doing talking to that white guy? I said, oh, man, the dude asked me about working out. He's from Orange County, man. I'm from Orange County. I used to live in Huntington, blah, blah, blah. Oh, man, the homie said, you were talking to white. Don't be talking to them white guys. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm in prison and I got another inmate telling me who I can talk to? Come on, man.
Yeah, it seems, you know, a couple of things you mentioned. One is that when you're in jail, you know, you said that the limit with these people is that they put their hand on you. Like that's the limit. And I think like
Yes.
something with what's going on with race, like you said, if your grandfather or somebody's in the wrong place and somebody's like gonna like physically do something, like that's a no-no, whether you're a police officer or another person. You don't like the color of my skin, that's fine, but don't touch me, you know, like that type of
That's
thing.
right. That's right.
And then what another thing you mentioned is it's so funny because I'll hear this stuff and people talk about race like, oh, it's white people making fun of black people. And when I was a kid, like you were saying, like, especially with boys, I don't know if it's just boys like to like talk trash with each other, but the craziest comments would come from one black dude to another, like, oh, you dark as shit, you know, this type of stuff. And it's so crazy because that type of stuff is considered racism. And among young boys joking with each other, it's if it's friendly, like that's just back and forth. And it made me think when you were talking is like some black dudes telling you, why are you hanging out with white people? And when I was a kid, people would joke about, you know, hey, this is the white boy in the crew for a bunch of, you know, black dudes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but the way somebody would say it would show the type of person they were. So like if I was at a party and some black dude who I don't know, and he was like, well, who the fuck brought this white boy? Like that's mean. Like there was a mean quality, you know? And then there's a difference if your buddies are hanging out and saying, oh, here come, we got the light skin, you know, it's like you're joking, but it's not something deeply serious. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like when you're
well, see, the thing is back then too, it wasn't like people filmed it and went viral. Somebody seen it in Japan or in Germany that you got made fun of. But I mean,
Yeah.
literally, we were the base kids, so we would have capping contests all the way to school, 40-minute ride to San Francisco from Treasure Island. And then you like get on the bus home and you're like, you see them get like, oh man. I mean, so our bus would have kids from 6th grade all the way up to seniors. And the seniors were like, get the back of the bus, make you get up off my seat, and you
Yeah.
get capped on. I remember they capped on this girl and she started crying. I felt bad for her, but I couldn't say nothing because they'd cap on me next. You know, and my friend, one of my good friends, he's a big time like cop guy now. And he used to come with me, blonde hair, blue eyes, and we come to school and they be like him. Oh, I heard you got your little white partner with you. You got your white, and we clown. And he was cool, and he tried to be hip too. And he was, you know, and he told me one time, he's like, dude, when you weren't around, I got these guys jump me and try to take my Jordans. He said, you know, I got beat up, but I kept my shoes on. But it's like you laugh at it now. But I mean, that was growing up in the city and having mixed culture and even living on base where you had, you know, this guy's dad was a Marine, this guy's dad was in the Navy, this guy's dad was in the Coast Guard.
Yeah.
But with nobody going and saying, hey man, your son's been talking about my son and blah blah blah. Dude, you worked it. You know, you kids worked it out. I mean, we'd have boxing matches in little parks, and the big kids would regulate it, and then afterward, you guys shake hands, and that was it. So
Yeah.
everybody wasn't as tender. It was a bunch of tender tender boys out there right now, man.
And I wonder, see, I mean, so I'm in Montessori education. I mean, I've developed up to get into this, but there's a lot of, we don't have like anti-bullying stuff. So in the classroom, if a child has conflict with another child, as long as they're not hitting each other, you want to see if they can first attempt to solve the issue, and then if it gets out of hand, then you have an adult to come over and maybe aid, but you don't immediately jump in to help. Like I think, and I'm curious your take on this. I think old school was like, hey, fight it out, boys. And then new school is kind of like, no, nobody talk bad to each other. So it went from kind of like, hey, as long as you don't have a knife, beat the hell out of each other, to don't yell, don't say anything mean. So I think it's gone too far the other way, but I'm not too cool with the old school where it was just like punch it out. Cause that, like, for a 5-6-year-old, it's like, that maybe that's not the way to handle things. But what's your take?
Well, man, I mean, I got jumped at 6 years old. I got fights 7 years old. I mean, on base, I got chased by, when I was like 11, 12, I got chased by a 16-year-old and ran as fast as I could before he caught me, And so I've seen, like, going to the roller skating rink, being scared, dealing with this stuff, but it builds character. And even during all this time, I still never really had a male figure. So if I would have had a father, it would have been like, hey man, if the dude does this, do this, and maybe instill something into me. And the problem is these fathers aren't stepping up. They're weenies, bro. And I hate to say it, they're the woman and the man. If you have a relationship, the man usually opens the door for the woman, buys the groceries, she cooks the food. And I'm not saying a woman's, trapped in the house, but dude, you got to man up. Women now are trying to do man jobs, and it's not the same. I don't care how much a woman works out. A guy who's soft he'll annihilate her. He's just a different type of dude. So these men and these sons, they're not being men to their sons. These guys are weenies, and it's basically been weaned out over 2 generations. Oh, no. So you don't have any more strong men. I mean, you got to look at, like, when I was born, last generation after guys who got out of Vietnam, hard asses, guys who were tough. I mean, you see some of them now, you talk to them, and I can relate to them. And they're like, yeah, when I was a kid, it's either this or go to military, blah, blah, blah. You got drafted. It's a different hardcore mentality. And you had the Black Panthers, you had, a lot of, like, emerging gangs. So it was a different core value. Now these kids, they do stuff for likes and follows and subs. It's nothing about their character. They're not into, like, the things that make you tough, as far as, like, in our neighborhood, who's the kid who rode the farthest wheelie? Who's the kid who jumped a little? There's a dirt park and we go over there and that was your rite of passage. You jump that, you can go ride with the other kids. Or there was all these things that made you tough. If you could dunk a basketball on a little basketball court, you were, looked at as one of the guys. Now, there's none of these rites of passages that doesn't involve serious violence or something stupid, where back then you can get away with jumping a bike, dunking a basketball, riding the furthest wheelie, or playing tackle football with these guys, and you became a man. It made you somebody. There's none of that no more, because these kids don't want to. It's like they're too protective, and then there's not good men. I mean, you look at these relationships, you see them all over the internet, bro. It's pathetic. It's like, dude, where's the real men at that can give these boys some core values? A son, you don't have to whoop his butt. I remember my grandpa, the threat of looking at that belt hanging in the closet was enough. I got spanked maybe 2 times in my life, even though I got in trouble later on as an adult, but I never talked back. I see kids now, Mom, shut up. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
He told his mom to shut up. I told you guys I don't like steak. I want a sandwich. You're like, dude, you're going to eat what we have. You're not eating. You're not having nothing. Right. So it's like, these kids, bro, it's like, I've never seen that.
Man, first of all, this is funny because I'm having you on and I know I'm going to lose, and I don't even care because I like being real. That's why I wanted to have you on. I was like, I'm tired. Like, I need somebody who just talks straight, but 25% of my audience is going to go nuts and say, Jesse, something's wrong with you, but that's all right. I like it. So 2 things that pop out from what you're saying. One is, I just want to get a little bit like dig into it because some of what you're saying, I love the idea of you got to hold people accountable and you got to hold standards. And there's a way in which it's like, oh, you don't want to eat your food, you can eat whatever you, then what do you want? And it's there's no limits, there's no structure, right? It's like the child's emotions rule the house, they rule the parent. So I'm with you, but I want to push back on the kind of like, I know what you're saying. I think it's almost better if you had somebody telling you, if you act up, you're going to get hit than somebody who just lets you do whatever. Like, I almost think that's better. But is it necessary to have the threat of you being hit to do good instead of trying to figure out ways where, like, I'm telling you, Herc, I've got kids that are 2 years old that want to set the table, that desperately, you don't have to hit them to do their chores. They love it. So my question to you is, do you think there's a perspective we can tweak this where it's like, instead of saying forcing kids and like, I'm going to hit you, it's, hey, how can I understand this kid so I can get him to want to do the things that most people don't want to do? That type of stuff.
Great point. So I never had a threat of being hit to go set the table. My grandma never threatened me with a hit to open a door or to say hi to her friends or to say, excuse me. It's mannerism. You don't sit at the table and start eating until she sits down and everybody sits down. These are things you got to teach kids young. See, kids try boundaries at a young age. Oh, okay. That might be all it takes. But if you let him do this and then he turns around and throws something at you, dude, he's testing you. You got to nick that in the bud early. Then you don't have to spank. But some kids are just hard kids. Some kids got a stronger soul where they need to, sometimes it might only be one good spanking. Roy Jones said his dad used to spank him, but it made him who he was. And him and his dad fell out later in life, but his dad was tough, but it made him one of the baddest boxers in the world. You can't have a soft ass and be a tough dude. It ain't gonna work, man. It ain't gonna work.
You know that Johnny Cash song, Boy Named Sue?
I've heard the song, but I don't know.
Yes, I love, because I was just talking about this with a buddy where he's like, the kid's all pissed off because his dad named him Sue, and then his dad took off. It's like Johnny Cash, some alcoholic father. He's like, oh, my dad called me Sue, and all my life I've had to go with this girl's name. And then he finally meets his dad in the bar. He's like, that's my dad. And he goes up to him, he's like, you called me Sue. And then the dad and the boy get in this fight because they're both alcoholics at this point. And then they're like head to head, Herc, like just both tough, really tough. And the boy's like, why'd you ever call me Sue? He's like 20 at this point. And the dad says, boy, somebody had to make you tough to survive out in that world. I knew if I named you Sue, you get in a bunch of fights and you learn to protect yourself, like that type of thing.
I think that comes along with, if you want a society, if you want a soft and you want some other, I don't care if it's country or somebody to come over here and just punk everybody and to take over. I'm not with men being submissive, bro. You're not going to just come in here in my house and I don't care if there's an invasion. Dude, I'm going to die before you touch my wife. Before you touch my kids. Yeah. I'm going to get you, man. You're not going to hurt my family. If you do something to my mom, I'm coming after you. There's no, why'd you do that? Oh, man.
Yes.
Oh, man. Oh, I don't know what I'm gonna do. No, but I'm plotting and I'm gonna come get you. And dude, that's what you gotta have, protectors. You have to have guys. My friend, he told me a story. His dad was a military police, and he came home one day and looked like he had a black eye or something bruised. And his dad said, what happened? He said, I got into a fight with this kid, blah, blah, blah. He said, what? And you let this happen? He said, man, I got a dress in the closet. If you come home tomorrow and that kid ain't beat up, you're going to wear that dress to school for the next week. Dude, he went to school. He said he was scared to death. The teacher came in, sat down. He seen that kid and they started class. He went up to him and started wailing on him, beat him up. Got called to the principal's office. The other dad came up there. The principal, they called him. His dad came in there wearing his uniform with his gun. And his principal said, hey, man, blah, blah. He said, shut your damn mouth. Come on. You know what I mean? That's right. That's what I'm talking about. And his dad, this dude is hard. I mean, this dude, I call him a Terminator in prison, but he's a great dude, stand-up dude, will die for you. But his dad taught him, man, you are not to be soft as a male. You got to protect. The world is not soft, man. If you want to come out here and conquer some shit, if you want to have, and if you want to have anything of value for your legacy down the road, and you think you're going to be soft, in business, dealing with people from other countries who have different values, dude, you have the wrong thing coming.
Man, Herc, I'd love to talk to you at some point a little deeper into it, because I'm so with you, the sense that nobody wants to, like, I don't want to say when you're using like man up language, but the idea of like, if somebody comes at you, you got to protect yourself and the people you care about. Like, nobody's going to touch my wife. Nobody's going to touch my child. But I wonder if this feeling of like, because I've met some military, I lived in Wichita with my wife, and we met some military dudes, and they really taught us how to take care of ourselves, like really, be defensive. But it's this kind of like chill, I can handle myself. Like I don't need to yell at anybody. I don't need to mess with anybody. I don't need to be a tough guy. But if you come at me, you will learn very quickly how quick I turn into your worst enemy. So it seems like the way you're talking is like, this is like this dangerous world out there, and you got to like tell your child, you better protect yourself. And it I don't know, it feels like it amps them up that the world's like this dangerous, crazy place. And like, what if we could help kids to realize, take care of yourself, so when the bad guys do come around, you take care of them, but the world's not that dangerous. I mean, what do you think?
You don't have to walk around talking about your I'm a bad mama jamma. You don't wear it on your chest. See, I've always learned that the tougher dudes are quiet.
Yeah.
The dudes I knew who were the killers in the neighborhood, quiet. They didn't talk. They just walked around. You looked at the dude, he'd be in the club or at the school, and he don't say much. But dude, if he goes off, it's a wrap. So yeah. I'm not saying that you teach your kid, you walk around trying to bully or announce to the world, I know jujitsu or kung fu, or I'm a boxer. Dude, I never had to tell anybody in prison that if you touch me, I was gonna do something. I was very, very courteous. I navigated, man. I have respect from the guards to the inmates. So, but if you try something, by any means, I'm gonna damage you, bro, because you tried to hurt me. But yeah. I didn't go around projecting that. Same thing as a kid. The guys I grew up, you didn't, the tough guys, they weren't running around trying to fight everybody. They were just who they are. But you knew not to push so-and-so, because if you did push him over the edge, I heard about what he did to the last guy that did that.
Yeah. So
you left him alone. So I'm saying you teach values. Military guys, I knew some Marines, dude, no joke. But they were quiet. You get them in the bar. But if you hit one of them, you're going to have 10 Marines on your ass. Yeah. So that's my thing. And I'm not saying, like I said, you got to tell your kid, the world, be on your guard. No, but be on your guard. Just be aware. Don't be passive. Be aware. Because if you're too soft, people take advantage of you, especially in these days. There's a lot of cons. There's a lot of people trying to take advantage of you. There's guys, even in prison, you see guys that try you to see if you're the certain little things they can get away with saying stuff. They somebody might call you a word and they're like, dude, did he say that? Dude, you better check that real quick, because now the next thing is going to be something else. The next day is going to be something else. So you got to know, just like a kid, like I said, you got to nip it in the bud quick. Like, hey man, don't be disrespecting me. Come here, let me talk to you. You say that again, I'm a bust you upside your head. Oh, dude, I'm so okay, cool. Just like we have understanding. Don't think because I'm polite and I'm a nice dude and I talk well that I'm soft, bro, or you can punk me. It ain't going down. So you got to let people know where your boundaries are, but you should have some boundaries, and you should establish some type of, like I said, defense mechanism in your child, or protection thing, to know that, hey, you got to be aware of certain things in the world.
Yeah, and if somebody messes with you, to be prepared. And I think, weirdly enough, and I know I'm going to get crap for this as well, one of the things lacking in the education that I'm in is that they help children. We really help children to deal with conflict if you're talking it out and so forth. But what happens when that other kid, or you're an adult, the polite talking doesn't work, and he wants to, toss something at you? What are you going to do? And that is surely not taught. So it's not taught as a part of the curriculum. Like, hey, here's self-defense. You could be, you said 6 years old, maybe you got jumped. I mean, it could be early. I know I hung out with guys that they'd walk down the street, and somebody, just because it's a big black dude, some Asian gang member in the neighborhood, I'm walking around, nobody's stopping their car to get at me, but my, 6'2", dark, super dark black friend, they've gotten pulled over by a car. Hey, where are you from? And how does he deal with that if he's never been taught, or he's no model, as you're saying, as a figure in his life, saying, how do you deal with these situations? So yeah, I'm with you. I just, that element of kind of like the old school, like, you better eat your food or you're going to get an ass whooping. It's like fear in a child at 4 or 5. They don't, the world's shouldn't be that fearful.
Yeah,
Is what I'm saying,
you shouldn't walk around intimidating your kids. And I never had like, in the movies where, you didn't eat your food and you hit the table and food goes flying. I've never experienced that. You know what I mean? Nobody in my family did that. But like my grandfather from the South, if he's eating chitlins and hog maw, I look at my grandma, she's like, hey, honey, there's some spaghetti. I eat the spaghetti. You know what I mean? And she would do that for me because I don't want to eat that. I don't want to eat liver. I didn't want to eat pig feet. My grandpa eats some weird stuff, man. He's from Georgia. So catfish and all this stuff, man. I would just want a hamburger, spaghetti, something different, cornbread,
you got like this gold plate. Marcus, here's your gold plate food.
Oh my God, man. So I couldn't eat stuff like that. But yeah, it's just, you giving a kid the tools. Like you said, I've been rolled up on and the guy's like, hey, homie, what's up? What's up, blood? And I look at him and I knew if I would have said the wrong thing, this guy's sitting back there with a shotgun, he would have blew my head off. So of course I knew not to say nothing. But at the same time, I'm like, dude, I don't want to be caught like that again. So I want to go get me a pistol. But I shouldn't have to be in an environment at 15 or 14 where I feel I got to carry a pistol to school. But like, you got to teach your kids certain things because he'll learn them on the street. So maybe if I would have had somebody older and been like, you know what, we're going to take you to a different school. You don't need to be around this, blah, blah, blah. And these type of people, they don't have nothing to live for. If he'd explained it to me, it would have made more sense. But as a kid, I'm trying to rationalize it from a child mentality to make it make sense. And a child mentality is like, okay, well, you got a gun, I'll get a gun. Yeah. And then if I see you again, I'll shoot you before you shoot me. So it's a fear-based reaction rather than an analytical reaction. Yeah. So that's what needs to be taught. And a lot of parents don't do that because most parents, they have kids and they just pretty much push them. And it's like, oh yeah, my kid's great. What life skills did you give your kid? You gave him you gave him the Yeezys, you gave him a car, you gave him the clothes, you got him in a good school, but what did you give them for real? Yeah. What life lessons? I had no life lessons. I had here and there, but life lessons is those quiet talks, those conversations where, hey, little Herc, you ever thought about this? Or, growing through life, I went through this. I remember one time I did this and I made a mistake and grandpa did this. And I needed to hear those as a kid. Yeah. Where I could be like, oh man, okay. And maybe think better. So when I seen something, I knew that, you know what, you guys, I'm not going with you guys. I'm gonna go home. Or that's not a good idea. I remember my mom told me this or my dad told me this. You need to have those talks with kids and parents don't have those talks. They don't have the sit down Sunday dinners or the dad don't take his kid out no more for the drives where they pull over and have the conversations and have the son and father time or the mother-daughter time. You got to have those conversations, man.
Yeah, I like that. And you had said earlier about the strong sense of self that you kind of developed, that you had to kind of recreate or create this new person for yourself. And I wonder if parents are having those real talks and being kind of real with their kids, like talking to them as if they're normal human beings. But at the same time, doing things alongside them, because as you're saying, they don't have those talks, but they also, a lot of parents aren't doing things with their kids. Like the dads used to build, work on a car outside, mow the lawn, the kids right beside him, learning that. But now, a lot of people tell me like, oh, you should give back. And I'm like, I do this because I want people to hear these conversations and so forth. But some of the people that have the worst problems are rich people because the kids aren't doing anything. Like they're given everything. So I don't think it's not only that they're not getting the talks that you're talking about, and they're also not doing real work like adults do to kind of feel that, hey, I can be a man or I can be a strong woman, so they're not developing that sense of self that I think you talked about earlier.
You made a good point about like working on a car because I'm in the cars now, but I remember as a little kid, when I was probably 4 or 5, when my grandpa used to wash the car, I used to want to go out there and help. You know what I mean? Yes. Like, even though I didn't know what I was doing, get the sponge or help dry the car off. And then I was fascinated with all the chemicals. Like, can I spray this and wipe this down and how it shines or clean the interior? And, as I got older, me and my grandpa, I moved, so I didn't have that connection. So I lost that. And by the time I hit 12, 13, my mom divorced. That's why I was drawn more to the streets. But had I had that more, like growing up, say we built the engine together, or we made a car together, we did something, those type of bonds, kids see value in that. and it helps them make different choices. Learning, going to work at the, your dad's, your uncle's shop, sweeping or doing or filing something. It's teaching kids these values. And like you said, rich people, a lot of them don't do that. I knew some kids when I was growing up in Huntington, like my one friend, his family had like 8 Vietnamese restaurants, but he was in charge of ordering all the meats for the restaurant. So
Yeah.
he had a county job as a 16-year-old, 15-year-old. By the
Awesome.
time he graduated and went to Stanford, dude, he was already ready to be a millionaire because he was
Yeah.
already embedded with these qualities and he knew stuff. I knew another friend, he had his own strawberry farm. These kids were already, so these kids didn't want to mess up or defile their parents because they were taught values which gave them more respect. It
Yeah.
wasn't a
Early
whooping,
on.
it was a value. So, hey, son, I'm gonna buy you this. You do this. You can sell these to your friends and make this much money, or you can do this. They're
Yeah.
teaching value, and kids like, huh? I see value in this. I know, man. I'm doing this. Kids learn things, but you got to teach those things. Otherwise, you expect the school to teach them. Everybody wants the school to be the kid's babysitter. The
Yeah. It's
school
not gonna
can't do
happen.
everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I don't know where you are, Big Arc, but do you know it's illegal for kids to work? So like if I wanted, like I have my kid, he grows up, let's say 10 years old, I have my own business and I want him to work in that business and make money working. It's illegal for that child to work because it's child labor, way back in the days when child labor was an issue in America. So all the things that might help a child to be developed, like say working at the Vietnamese restaurant 30 hours a week or something, unless you're 14 years old in most states, you can't even work. It's
So
illegal.
so so what you do is you don't actually work, but you teach them core hustles. Like my first job wasn't really a job, but I would mow lawns on base.
Yeah.
I had a little lawnmower. I would use our family lawnmower. I'd go around with a little gas can. Hey, would you like your lawn mowed? Dude, I'd hit the whole base. Go, and I have my little
Love it.
regulars, and I come back every Monday or Tuesday, mow their lawn. My other hustle was my mom made good brownies. So I take some of the brownies and sell them at school because I brought my lunch. Say, man, I got the brownie 50 cents. I'd hustle. It wasn't a real job, but it was a hustle. I did BMX bikes. I'd paint frames, take them apart, paint the frame,
Man.
full colors, and then, oh man, who did this? Oh,
Dude,
I
what
can
did you
do your
not
frame.
do? What did you not
So,
do? You were involved in everything, man.
well, I was always an entrepreneur because I wanted more, but I didn't know how to. I didn't know how to take it to the next level. Had I
Yeah.
had somebody who was like a business person in my family, dude, I would have been a millionaire by the time I was 20. But I didn't know,
Yeah.
man. So I kept doing dumb stuff.
We got to get you connected, man. We'll do like young hustler series or something, like 5-year-olds starting up little lemonade stands and stuff.
Hey, man, I mean, that's when it starts, stuff like that. I mean, dude, literally making something from nothing,
Yeah, I
and
love it.
that's how I started. And I just, if I wouldn't have got involved in the illegal aspect, I would have, who knows, because I would have lost all that time. But I always had a drive. It's like, I'm different from my brother. I have two brothers, one passed, but nobody has the hustle like me. I mean, they have to go and be told what to do. I don't need to be told what to do. I know what I need to do because I have a different drive. Some people don't have that drive. They're cool just existing. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying there's nothing wrong with that, but for myself, I used to look around and I'd be like, man, I'd be in a neighborhood or be around. I'm like, dude, I want the best of the best. I want to be able to do this. I want to be able to do that because if I could do that, I can help other people. And also people will be inspired by what I could do. So
Yeah.
I always looked at it like I'm not the normal kid. And so I always thought like, man, what is my purpose? Because the people I'm around, it's not like it's like I'm limited with these people. So I always looked outside my household to find inspiration, and that's why I go out. Like now, I'm always going out trying to meet people because I feel that I need to go and be the smallest fish in the big pond so that I can get the next level of what I'm trying to achieve.
Yeah, no, and I love it, man. And that's, you're such a unique character. Like when I saw you, I was just personally, I was like, I was drawn to you. I even started, watching some prison movies because I thought to myself, man, would I survive in prison? And I'm thinking I might have to change who I am to survive in that environment. And it really kind of shook me a little bit watching a lot of your videos. And then I thought, man, I'm always having different people on like that's related to education, but this man is saying some stuff that I think everybody can learn from parents and teachers. So I thought, let's just have a conversation. So, I mean, I'm so happy when I reached out, you responded and say, let's make this happen. So, man, I appreciate it. I appreciate you taking the time, Big Herc. So
Yeah, and I apologize for not getting back sooner because like I'm always doing stuff and I'm trying to manage all these different IGs and messages
Oh,
and
I can
emails.
imagine.
But
Well, hey man, it's great times. And again, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you, man, and what you do. So thank you.
hey, thank you for the opportunity, man. And let me know when it drops, and I'll share it, man.
Yeah, yeah. No, all right, that's the conversation with Big Herc or Marcus Timmons. If you're interested in reaching this man or just finding out more about him, you can go over to his site at www.bigherc916.com. If you're listening, it's Herc is Herc. I just want to say thanks again to this man. So, Marcus, thank you for coming on. I'm just grateful he's alive to share his stories. Agree or disagree with him. It's wonderful to hear somebody just talking straight. Whether you believe X or you believe Y or Z, just saying what you feel, giving reasons for them. Now, if you disagree with some of the things he said, or maybe agree, share your take. I know talking with Marcus, we talked about it behind the scenes. It's always fun to see what people think about commentaries and what we're sharing. So leave a comment if you're on YouTube or you're on, listen on a podcast, leave a comment there. Reach out to us. You can reach me at montessorieducation.com, send an email. Same with Big Herc at bigherc916.com. Do that. Now, Herc actually sent me some pictures of when he was a baby and then growing up, when he started to get pumped up and ripped up, and then when he got into jail, and then a little bit later, and then now where he's looking really good and just he's rocking it. So if you want to see those, head over to montessorieducation.com, click on podcast, and that's where the page is for this particular episode. I don't have much more to say, I don't think. I think maybe just ending with just we got to get more experiences from people outside of our little bubbles. I often talk about this in education because I'm in Montessori education, and man, Montessori can sometimes be a real bubble, and people don't get outside of it to see what's normal. Like the idea that Marcus is talking about, spanking a child, that's so foreign to most people in Montessori. And I mean, I don't think it's the best approach for sure, but we got to remember that I'd say at least a big percentage of many cities and states in America, people are still spanking their kids. That's a normal thing. So we've got to see how different people approach things, and then have the discussion, and then hopefully move towards a better way of being with children overall. So fewer and fewer people end up locked up. Again, I think a lot of this is about choice. Marcus is really emphasizing that he made a decision. This is not what I want. I'm going to change my life. So I think there's something there, but we all know what an influence a mom and a dad can have on a child's life. So just ending with that note. And again, hope you guys enjoyed. Have a good night, day, wherever you're at, and adios for now.